Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson. Tonight, we have Matt Ware back on the show. Matt has spent more than 30 years studying and practicing leadership, from Starbucks management and executive ministry to startups, entrepreneurship, and coaching high-level leaders. Today, he works with business owners and leaders who want to grow what they're building without losing themselves in the process. When Matt joined me last year, we talked about the shifts that can change the way we lead and the way that we live. But a lot has happened since then, and today we're going to go deeper into some issues and ideas that may challenge the way you think about faith, leadership, motivation, and even the people you choose to follow. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year.
Hey, Laura, it's great to be back with you and be back with the Defenders Live Nation. Excited to have this conversation. And thanks for having me back the second time. That's exciting.
It is exciting. And you're one of my favorite guests. Don't tell anybody, Matt. But the last time you were here, we had a great conversation. Yeah. And I want to open it up with, I'm debating what to open it for sure here, because we're going to talk about motivation today, which is something that a lot of people say they struggle with. A lot of my followers speak to me about that. Okay. But I think I'm going to open with a timing issue, the timing of how God makes things play out in our lives, and how sometimes even I struggle with that, because I would declare myself as an impatient person. And so sometimes it's hard for me to trust God's timing. But also sometimes, Matt, I think that there is a time and place where we're being called to take action. And it's not all just about sitting back and being passive, where there needs to be some responsibility in that. Yeah. How do you describe how those things intertwine from a theology standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think we should probably preface any answer or opinion that we would give by saying we don't really know, right? Like, we don't understand how it all works. And so, to speak as if we're speaking for God on this issue, maybe would be a little bit presumptuous. But I will give you my viewpoint on this that I think probably is related to, and people probably will fall into different camps based on their personality and temperament and all of that, because I do think that impacts maybe how you see this from a theological perspective, but also just like life experience and how that's informed, my life as well as the leaders that I've worked with, in various capacities. I tend to be more on the take action side than the sit around and wait side. That's my natural leaning. That's my natural disposition. But I don't think that is purely a human, viewpoint on things. You're a person of faith. I'm a person of faith. I know a lot of people in the audience are. And so we certainly would say, obviously, we value prayer and hearing from God or following that sense, whatever terms people might put on it. But I see a lot of people of faith, quite honestly, that are still praying about things that they should just be doing and executing on. And so I don't want to ever paint the picture that prayer is bad or that you shouldn't be praying. Of course, pray. But at some point you got to get off of your face and get out and do something, right? And so here's what I think about a lot. This has been on my mind a lot recently. So you study the Old Testament, right, where the children of Israel, they're going out of Egypt into the promised land. Even if you're not a person of faith, you know that general narrative. And it's a really interesting thing, because when they transition from Moses' leadership to Joshua's leadership, all of a sudden, it's like you just get this sense that, yes, of course, God's in the picture, but he puts so much responsibility on Joshua to say, just go out and do this thing. There's a promised land waiting for you, but just sitting back and praying about it isn't going to be what brings it to pass. You got to go in and fight the battles. You got to go in and actually take the thing. And so I don't know. I just see a lot of people of faith who are stuck in this prayer mode and not taking action. And so I don't know, I'm passionate about that. I coach, some pastors and people of faith who are business owners, and that's something that I see them struggle with a lot. So, I don't know how that speaks to the timing issue because, how do you know? How do you know when it's time to pray and when it's time to take action? I don't know. I guess I would just rather be one of those people who's taking action, even if I'm getting it wrong, than to just be sitting back and nothing's happening because I think God's going to do it all for me.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned taking a direction and taking action. I was listening to a Jim Rohn clip today, and that was one of the things that he talked about was people who are indecisive, who just stay in this mode of what do I do without making a decision and doing it. And he said, which I thought was really interesting, he said that even if you take action and it's not in the right direction, you will know more quickly by doing that than you will for sitting there contemplating.
Right.
So, God will lead us if we start to go the wrong direction. I think that there will be a strong sense of, oh, actually, wait, no, that's not right.
Right.
If we continue to stay aligned and pray about it.
Yeah.
And that would be my sense as well. So I thought that was interesting how that just happened to line up with what we're talking about.
I remember my dad always saying that it's easier to steer a moving car than a parked car. And I think there's some truth to that. And, something else I think, along those lines, and maybe it's a fear idea. I think sometimes people of faith are afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of getting it wrong. They want to do what, they want to be obedient to what they think God is calling them to do. And they're so scared that if they make a mistake, that they're just going to screw everything up. And I think maybe God is a lot kinder than that, a lot more benevolent than that. And maybe he's just excited to see us take action because then he can kind of steer us and guide us a little bit.
Well, and for me, as far as the action goes, when I pray about something and I know he wants me to move on it, it's almost like I can't sit still.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like to me. And I don't know if that's how everyone perceives that, but it's like this, I don't know how to describe it. It's not a panic or anything. It's just this strong urge to take action.
Yeah.
So maybe not everyone feels that. Not everyone is like me, I guess. I don't know. Maybe not sure what that's all about.
Well, you're right. I mean, I do think sometimes their personality types, their temperament probably can impact some of that. But I just wonder sometimes, this whole idea that sometimes is thrown around in faith circles about, we're, quote, waiting on God. And I wonder how much he's actually waiting on us, like he'll move when we move. He'll do something when we're willing to take action. And so, that's a drum that I beat a lot, especially with Christian leaders and business owners that I work with, because I've seen people get stuck in their life and stuck in their leadership for long periods of time under the super spiritual sounding guise of I'm praying about it. I'm still waiting for God to tell me or whatever. And again, I don't want to discount prayer. You absolutely want to hear from God. I just sometimes think we use that as an excuse instead of getting out there and getting after it.
Yeah. And I believe that any change or any true transformation or anything that's of real value in life, including what God's called us to do, all requires some level of honesty. Like at the end of the day, honesty is what it's about. Honest with him, honest with ourselves, honest with the people around us. And I just believe that there are so many people not even realizing how much they're lying to themselves. Or and even in prayers, I wonder, I sometimes apologize to God because I'm so raw sometimes. And I think, you know what? I think that being honest with him is what he wants.
Absolutely. And I've said this for a long time, that, and this didn't originate with me. I don't know who I got this from, but the idea that nobody lies like leaders, not necessarily to other people, but to ourselves, right? Like you're saying, like we lie to ourselves about these things. And so I think this sense of being honest with ourselves about, where are we really going and what do we want and what are we trying to accomplish? And even honest about those desires, that it's okay to be honest about what we really want in our lives, in our families, in our finances, in our businesses. Like we should be honest about that. But I think you're right about being honest with God. I think sometimes we can even even feel like we have to like somehow impress God or like clean up, what we say or how we say it for him, as if he can't handle that. And, if we really think that he is as big as we say he is, then he's got to be able to handle that honesty, right? He's got to be able to handle
anyway
realness and the rawness. Otherwise, we've kind of reduced him to something that, can't handle it.
Yeah, totally. I had a thought, but then it left and I didn't write it down. So it's
gone. No.
I hate it when that happens. That's why I'm like always frantically writing while someone's talking.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah. So I think this is actually a great segue into what I was going to get into next. But I want to touch on one more thing around the theology part. And that is, we talk about this a lot in self-defense, especially with women. The idea, and this goes along with Christian theology for some people, and that is this niceness, this we must accept everybody, and this passivity that seems to be getting more and more prevalent. Although I'm not sure that that is really how we should always be. And how can that be dangerous? Because in self-defense, that can be very dangerous for a woman to be passive and nice in a situation where she needs to be direct.
Yeah. Because
a lot of women get themselves in trouble that way.
Yeah, that absolutely would make sense. The sort of niche that you're describing, obviously you're very familiar with, and I wouldn't be, as familiar with some of those specific dynamics, but that concept of being nice, being agreeable, not wanting to offend, hurt people's feelings, create awkwardness. I think this is a more prevalent problem for more people across more bands of society than ever before. And it's an interesting thing because I think, over the last however many years, as society has sort of downplayed masculinity and really, the rise of feminism and wokeism and like all these things, we could go down a lot of rabbit trails with that. I think some of what it has produced is this idea that everybody's got to be nice. And of course, I work, with a lot of guys. And so like, I see it more with the guys too, which in some ways, I don't want to say it's more frustrating, but in some ways it feels like it's. I'm like, yeah, you're a man. Like, come on, like man up and like take charge of this situation, right? But they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And again, and I don't want to exclude people, people who aren't people of faith, who are watching or listening. But this is the kind of the world that I live in. So many people of faith, I think, have mistakenly believed that to be a good Christian means that they're always nice, that they're always agreeable. And I think there's a real confusion around that. I think an honest reading of the scriptures and the gospels particularly would indicate that Jesus was not always a nice person. And I know even saying that like probably makes some people bristle if they've got like really traditional mindset around this, but Jesus was frequently not nice. The way that he spoke to the Pharisees and the religious leaders, not nice. Brood of vipers, sepulchres full of dead men's bone, like he's really like using insults that would have been like at the highest level of the day. When he goes into the temple and he just kind of loses his mind and tumps over the tables and like literally makes a whip and starts whipping people. Like it's hard to say that's nice, right? But what it is it's a courage and a strength that is willing to stand up for truth and for what's right in these moments and to speak to people or to act in a way that calls those things out. And so I think we should differentiate nice and kind, right? Like nice doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. It always feels good and all of that. Kind, I think, is rooted in truth, and it's not seeking to hurt people's feelings, but it will if it needs to. And I think that's the difference. And something, we talk about in leadership a lot is the idea of being clear when you're communicating with people, and that to be clear is to be kind. A lot of times, people who are managing teams, they don't want to have hard conversations because they want to be nice. They want to be perceived as a nice leader, a nice boss. But in being nice, they stop being clear. And so nothing ever changes. So we talk a lot about the idea of to be clear is to be kind. So I get pretty fired up about this because there's a lot of people who niceness is killing them.
Yeah. And being kind versus being nice, I think, requires courage. And some people just don't have a lot of it because it's really hard to be so brutally honest sometimes, especially in difficult conversations. And it seems so much easier just to play nice and smooth everything over. But my experience is that every time that I've been nice, there's been a price to pay for that.
Yep.
And usually the cost is something inside of me.
Yep.
Because I'm not actually saying what's really true. And in a sense, I'm actually, how could I say this? I'm compromising myself. I'm not living in integrity 100%.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the lying to yourself thing. It's almost like you have to lie to yourself in order to be nice, to not say the thing that you know you need to say or should say.
Yeah.
And just because you say something that isn't what someone wants to hear does not mean that it's your responsibility to take on their reaction. That's another thing that I've learned. It's like, that is their stuff to deal with. That is not your stuff to deal with. And so that's one thing that I've had to learn. It's been really, really hard, but ultimately has been the best for me and everyone around me. Because you're right. You can be more clear that way. People know where you stand, and you can do that in a kind way, but still be firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what happens in those scenarios like you're describing is you think that being nice preserves the relationship in the moment. And maybe it does. But from a long-term, big picture perspective, that relationship is not really strengthened or deepened. Respect doesn't grow. Like you said, you can't be responsible for their reactions, but both you and I, I'm sure, and just about anybody watching or listening can probably name people in their lives at some point, a teacher, a coach, a parent, a boss, a mentor, who gave them feedback that didn't feel good in the moment, but they became better for it, and your respect level for them actually went up. The depth of the relationship actually grew. Maybe not in the moment. Maybe it took, days or weeks or months or years before they appreciated it. But there was something about being told the truth in love, right? We talk about that. Like, kindness is not seeking to hurt people, but I'm willing to hurt your feelings in the moment if I have to, because ultimately I care about you enough to tell you what you need to hear.
I love it. I love all of this stuff. I love all the stuff we talk about every time, Matt. I can't even say why I love it so much. I appreciate you as a communicator. I appreciate your heart and what you're doing for people to help them. But you're a straight shooter too, and I appreciate that.
Well, likewise. That's why we have great conversations.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm debating where to go next.
All right. I'll follow your lead.
All right. Let's go into motivation, because this is a hot topic word all over social media, and people talk about the idea of motivation versus discipline. I don't even want to go into that.
Okay.
What I want to go into is the correlation or the relationship between action and motivation. It's like, which one comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Yep.
And for those people that I hear saying, I just need to get motivated again, which is what I used to say to myself. It's what I thought that I needed. Yeah. I just need to get motivated again. What do you say to that? You talk about people who don't have batteries included.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, and again, my primary focus is working with leaders, and so this is something we talk about, as they're building teams and as they're looking for people, to kind of bring into their orbit. We talk about the idea that they need to find people who come with batteries included, right? We've all every parent who's watching or listening knows the scenario where you give the kid the present, for Christmas or for their birthday, and they're opening it and they're so excited. And then you read the package and it says batteries not included, and you didn't see that, and you forgot to get the AA's or the 9-volt or whatever it needed. And so the toy doesn't work because the batteries aren't included. And I think there are a lot of people who have, people in their organizations, on their teams, who don't seem to have batteries included. They don't show up with any sense of internal motivation to work and to get the job done and to do all of that. And so that's kind of the context that I talk about that in. But I think, when we talk about specifically just like our own motivation, I think, and you're right. It's a buzzword. I think there's a little bit of overlap sometimes between like motivation versus inspiration, and like what's internal and what's external. And, some of it maybe is semantics or splitting hairs, but I do think every one of us has to dig deep enough to know what really does motivate me. And to understand that motivation, I think when we say I need to get motivated, like you just mentioned, I think what we're talking about, honestly, is more of an emotion that we're hoping will hit us or that we can muster up or something like that. And I think motivation has to be deeper than just emotion, right? Emotion comes and goes. Like we have good days and bad days, or good hours and bad hours. We know, like you said, discipline versus motivation. Like, okay, so it's a choice, it's a decision, not just a feeling. But I think motivation has to come from a place of saying, there is something in me that wants something bad enough, deep enough, that I can overcome my own emotional ups and downs, my own, energy ebbs and flows, to continue to go after that and to keep going down that path. And I don't know. I wouldn't pretend that that's easy, but I think that's the place we want to get to. I think that ultimately is the goal.
Yeah, that brought up another thing that came to mind that I saw yesterday. I think it was somebody was talking about motivation, and they were saying, again, we're going back to this idea of lying to yourself, but it's like, if you know deep down inside of you that what you say you want, you're not actually willing to do, put the work in to do, stop saying that you really want it, because, just be honest and be like, yeah, it'd be nice. I'm wishing, I'm hoping kind of thing. But that's very much different than making a decision and being 100% all in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think, the easiest, sort of example we could talk about with that everybody can relate to would be, something maybe in the health or fitness world, right? Like we want to lose weight, or we want to get in shape, or we want to run, the marathon in 3 hours, like stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And you're right. It's really easy to say, I want to lose weight. I want to, hit this body fat percentage or whatever it is. And everybody has a version of that, probably. Mm-hmm. Not everybody is willing to adjust their diet and adjust their schedule and get the workouts in and do that over a long enough period of time, consistently enough to actually see the result. Mm-hmm. And it's not about perfect execution, right? Like we know nothing's going to be perfect, but can we be consistent in those things long enough? And maybe that is the discipline word. But again, I think sometimes discipline has almost a negative connotation to it, because we're not all David Goggins, right?
Yeah.
But I think we can, like even the everyday person can say, no, I want this thing, whatever that thing is. I want to lose the 30 pounds. I want to pay off the car. I want to build the business, like whatever it is. There's something in all of us that can say, I want it enough to change my behavior, to change my actions consistently enough to get me down that path. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what we've got to ask ourselves is, am I motivated enough to do it? Because motivation can't just be what I want right now. That's a good place to start, maybe, but that's not what's going to sustain you. I think it's got to be like, what do I want over the long haul? What do I want my life to look like 1, 5, 10 years from now? Mm-hmm. And are the decisions I'm making today going to help make that happen?
Right. Right. So the short-term payoff is not, at least for me, where my eyes are looking.
Right.
I'm looking at the long term, and every decision that I make moment to moment, I'm asking myself the question, do I want this thing in the moment more than I want this thing in the future?
Right.
And that is literally as simple as I can make it. And those decisions over time stack and add up if you're making the decision for the long-term you versus what you want, what your emotions say you want right now in this moment.
Yeah. Well, I love the way that James Clear phrases that in Atomic Habits. He says something to the effect that every action is a vote toward who you're going to become. And so I think that's true. I think it's easy to say, okay, I can't just have a short term, like, I ate the salad today. Why haven't I lost the weight? Right? Like it's gotta be okay. I know that I've got to do it today so that tomorrow, the proverbial tomorrow, I'll be where I want to be, or at least be positioned, right? At least be heading down the path. And I think, maybe some people are more naturally disciplined than others, but I think everybody has their own struggle with motivation.
Yeah.
Some people look like they've got it all together, but we all know that the social media highlights aren't real life, or at least it's not the whole picture. Let's put it that way. And so I would also say, to anybody watching or listening who is frustrated about that or disappointed in themselves, right? And we know this is what happens, right? If we break our promises to ourselves consistently, that's when our self-esteem goes down, our confidence goes down, because we don't even believe ourselves. We've lied to ourselves so much and we know it. I would just encourage you, if that's you, to say, to recognize, like, everybody's got their own stuff. And just because yours is in your face doesn't mean, you don't see somebody else's, it doesn't mean it's not there. So
totally agree with you. I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but I made a rant about that very thing just like last week on my social media, like a 6-minute unedited rant.
Oh, I need to go watch.
It just went on and on and on and on. And it was all about my frustration with social media and how people who are posting things that are just the highlight reel of their life, they're not sharing any of the struggle of how they got to this end result. And that's all that people see. And it's intimidating to people who are on the sidelines, who are wanting to get, in the arena. And I'm all about encouraging people to get in the arena. And I've been on the sidelines before. And so to see that sometimes makes me angry, because it's not a realistic portrayal of the struggle of getting there. And that, I don't know, you could just go back and watch the rant, but because I don't even remember everything I said. I just know I was very frustrated in the moment. And it was really mostly about this responsibility that I feel as someone who has a podcast, who's on social media, who people are looking up to. I feel a deep responsibility to give it to them straight, to be honest and truthful throughout the entire process that I've documented of myself. And I don't want people thinking this is, easy when it's not. I don't want to lie to people and because it's hard enough.
Right.
Already. And to not portray it truthfully is a disservice, I believe, to anyone who's following or watching someone who is just further down the path than they are. Really, that's all it is. It doesn't mean you can't get there, but let's be honest about the journey, right? That's
Well, I think that comes down to, when you talk about like people who are on social media, whether they're, celebrity influencer status or, they're, kind of more everyday people like I would be. I think it comes down to, are you trying to impress them? Or are you trying to really make an impact in their lives?
I told you what I brought up in the rant.
It's like we're speaking the same language, Laura. We didn't even know it.
You say it so much more eloquently than I do.
I haven't heard the rant. It probably was amazing.
Not eloquent at all.
John Maxwell talks about this. He says that if you want to impress people, only talk about your successes and your strengths. If you want to impact people and connect with them, share your weaknesses and your failures and your vulnerabilities. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think people, they might admire you or look up to you because of your accomplishments, but they're going to really connect with you in those vulnerable places. And it doesn't mean you have to air all your dirty laundry, of course. I mean, there's wisdom that has to be exercised, but the idea of not hiding our process, our struggle, our journey in these things, because we actually want to make a difference in people's lives. I don't want fans, I don't want people, I never want to be in a place where people want my autograph. Like, I just want to know that I've helped them and made a difference in their lives. And I think you do that by hopefully sharing some of the realness and the rawness that you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to do sometimes, although I've had a lot of practice over the last few years. And so it's not quite as hard as it used to be, but I'm not as afraid of being seen as I used to be either. And I honestly used to be afraid of being seen on so many levels. So a lot has changed, but that is one of the things I said in my rant. I was not screaming, but I'm like, stop hiding. That's what I kept saying. I'm calling you out. You're fooling no one. Stop hiding.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and my guess is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can speak to this, but my guess is one of the reasons you're not scared of it anymore, or as scared of being seen and sharing the process and documenting the journey and the whole thing, is because what you realized is it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be, right? Like you're always going to have trolls, you're always going to have haters or whatever, but somehow, like, I think we think people, number one, are going to think about us more than they do anyway,
right.
Or that they're going to have like a stronger opinion, or they're going to come after us. And what you realize is most people are cheering you on. Most people want you to win. Most people are for you. And yes, you're going to have haters. If you do anything in the public space, you're going to have haters. You should just expect that. It's part of the price of admission. So don't worry about that. But the vast majority of people want other people to win and will celebrate that. And I think if we can get that in our hearts and in our heads, it makes a big difference.
If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber and take your next step toward becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs. Yeah, and I think for me, what really happened was, I had quite an identity shift when I came to Christ. And for me, I just truly felt like I cared more about what God thought of me than I did about what people thought of me. That's as basic as I can say it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that sometimes that doesn't, the scale doesn't, I don't struggle with it. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that what I felt called to do, and for the right reasons to do it, was so much stronger than my care or worry about what anybody would say or think about it.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing, because yes, identity, rooted in who we are in Christ, absolutely caring more about what God thinks than what people think. But I think there's something else too. And this maybe is where social media has hurt us. Well, there's probably a lot of places it's hurt us as a society, but this whole idea of, I think that there is a very healthy not caring what people think that we need to have. I think you could have an unhealthy, right? Like you could just be, metaphorically giving the finger to everybody all the time. Like, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. Like that, I don't think that's healthy. But I think the pendulum is too far the other way, generally in society, that we care too much about what people are thinking, are the hair and the makeup and the perfect backdrop, like all the things. And the reality is, they don't care nearly as much as you think they do. That whole adage of, people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you. Like, they're thinking about themselves. We're all self-centered. Right. And so right. I think just getting over that and having a healthy, I don't care, probably would be a good thing for a lot of us.
I agree. And I think, I don't know for sure, but this Simon Sinek quote about people don't buy what is it? People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yeah.
That has resonated with me for a long time. And I think that is why a lot of people follow me. I don't think they follow me so much because of what I do, as much as why I do it, because I share my why a lot. And people know where I stand, and they know my heart for the most part. And right. I think that's why. I don't know. I haven't polled anybody to find out. Sure. But I care more about the why than I care about the what. Yep. And I always have. Yeah. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing, and whether it's gun training or whether it's podcasts or whether it's social media. I care about the why on all of it. Yeah. And that's always very important to me. So, and I share that with people. So I wonder if that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I'm sure it does, because people see, I mean, the why is the heart, right? And people want to connect to someone's heart. They want to be able to buy into that.
Yeah.
Not to mention, if we get too hung up on the what will eventually change, right?
Right.
The methods, the processes, the technology, like all of that can change over time. The why probably doesn't ever really change. And so I think it's the more stable, sustainable place to build from. And I think, people connect with that at a much deeper level.
So I don't know if I can tie this in or not, but I don't want to go to the next subject without this one little thing that's hanging on here. And that is, I've heard Tony Robbins talk about this, and I can't remember who else, but I think I might have read it in a book, but I can't remember which one. Something about the idea that, we were speaking on motivation earlier. We're talking about the why right now.
Yep.
This idea that people will always return to baseline, meaning if they don't have the identity, let's use the workout example or whatever that you had before. If they don't have the idea and the true identity, they don't actually truly believe they're the kind of person who fill in the blank. They could, for a period of time, try to morph into that and force that to happen. But if that identity isn't there, or if that shift doesn't occur, then they will always return to baseline. And I think that's why people have such a hard time, not with losing the weight, but with keeping it off.
Okay.
That's my speculation. What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've heard that theory before, and I think there's got to be some truth to that. And we could probably extrapolate that out into other things, right? Like that. I think that probably shows up in relationship patterns for people.
Yeah, totally.
I think it probably shows up in employment scenarios. I think that idea of coming back to baseline is important. And so then I guess the first question, it has to be like, do you like your baseline?
Right.
If you like your baseline, then maybe that's not a problem. But if you don't, and let's assume that most of us don't like our baseline to some extent in some area, right? Like we want our baseline to be different, better, higher level. Then how do we shift that? And so this is an interesting thing. And I don't have an answer to it, so I'll just kind of like talk through it with you. But sometimes I think there's got to be, and let's put the spiritual piece aside for a second, because I think the way that it works spiritually is very clear, right? Like when we come to faith in Jesus, our identity is immediately changed, and then we live out of that identity. I don't know that it always works that way in other areas of life, and here's why I say that. I don't think you can just all of a sudden say my identity is a fit person if you are 100 pounds overweight and you haven't been to the gym in 6 years. Like it would be a little bit of that's where I think you would be maybe lying to yourself or taking on like a false persona to try to like convince yourself of something. I am this person, and I'm all for positive affirmation and declaration. Like I think that has a place, but I also think that there's something to taking action enough times, consistently enough, long enough to start building credible evidence. If I go to the gym 3 days a week for 6 months, now I have credible evidence to say, I don't know if I am a fit person, but I'm definitely becoming a fit person. I'm doing the things fit people do. And so if I say that, if I try to take on the identity without any proof, without any credible evidence, I think your brain knows the difference. Your brain's like, no, you're not. You're 100. Like, oh, what are we doing here? Right. This idea of like manifesting, like people that are flat broke, like I'm a millionaire. Like, no, you're not. You can't even keep a part-time job. So I do think there's this, again, back to the honesty piece. We keep coming back to that. How do I honestly say this is where I'm at, but I am going to take steps that begin to change my identity over time. So at some point, there's going to be this crossover where I can say, I may not have arrived yet, but I can credibly say, here's a trail of evidence that says I am, or I'm at least becoming this kind of person.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I wrote everything down I was going to say, and you said it all.
Sorry, I stole it from you.
No, you didn't. No, but that's been my experience. So that's what I was, writing about, and it's just so true. Although I will say, and I still do this sometimes, I did lie to myself in the beginning. I did say, you are strong, you are capable, all the things, right?
Sure.
Did I believe them? No, not really in the moment. And I repeated them over and over and over and over again, right? But I did repeat to myself a lot of things that I learned from the Bible, which is, I'm a child of God, and reflecting and thinking on the way that He views me, and try to take on as much as I can a reflection to myself of the way that He sees me, instead of looking at and seeing myself the way that I had previously, which tended to lean towards being way too hard on myself, saying really negative things to myself. And I think when those things would come up, I would question them. I would say, wait, is that how He would speak to me right now? And then I would question that, and I would go, actually, no, He would give me a lot more grace than that. And here's the other thing. I've been watching a lot of things lately, apparently, because all these little dingers are going off in my head. And that is this, I just said He would give me grace, and that's what made me think of it, which is like, I think there's a balance between grace and grit.
Okay.
And grace is needed, especially for me, because I tend to be more on the grit side, which is the at all costs, make it happen, kind of vibe of getting things done and stuff. Whereas some people, you talked about having different personalities, some people may need a little bit more grit, which are some of the batteries that need to be included in the action part of it, right? And so I just thought that was a really interesting way to look at it, this grit and grace concept. What do you think of that?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think you're right. I think different people need more of one than the other. And I would take it a step further and say, and in different areas, they need more of one than the other, right? Like there's some areas of my life, I probably am a little too hard on myself and I need to give myself more grace. There are other areas that I probably give myself too much grace and I need more grit. I need to get in and do the work. And so again, this probably comes down to some self-awareness, right? Which all of us hopefully are growing in, even though that's like an ongoing, you never arrive fully at self-awareness. But yeah, knowing where do I need more grace and where do I need more grit? And that can look different in different areas and in different seasons too. I think, and I don't know, maybe you can identify with this, or at least, some people, in the audience will be able to. I think a lot of times I have this simplistic view that once I do X, Y, and Z and accomplish A, B, C, then like life's good, life is smooth, I'll be happy, this, whatever, as opposed to seeing life as this dynamic thing that is always changing and ebbing and flowing. And I think I sometimes want a formula and to just say, well, if I do the formula, then I know I'll get the outcome. And some things, there's a version of that can be true. If you move more and eat less, you will move the scale, right? I mean, we know that that's true to some extent, but it's not like if you hit your goal weight or your goal body fat percentage, you'll just magically stay there forever. And like life is good and you never have to think about it again.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we can reduce life to just executing this formula and thinking that the result is going to just be a permanent thing. And we're probably not doing ourselves any favors by approaching it that way.
No, because I think it's setting yourself up for disappointment every time. I mean, I've done that before. I have given myself a body fat percentage. I've done exactly what you're saying. And then I surpassed the body fat percentage without even realizing I had gone past the goal line.
Yeah.
I was so busy doing the work that I didn't, like, nothing happened. I felt the exact same way I did when I was, 10% more body fat. Nothing changed really. I was the same person. And so the way I've looked at goals now versus how I used to look at goals is that I think to myself more, what kind of person do I need to become
Yes.
in order to achieve that goal, rather than just rather than just looking at it as this thing I attain at some point.
Yeah.
Because for me, the process has been the gold. It's not been, the outcome is not, it's like, I trained for 6 to 8 months for this 2-day competition that I did in July.
Yeah.
And when I look back on that experience over the last 8 months, now 9 months almost, the thing I remember the most was the process of getting there, more than those 2 days. The 2 days were like a blip on the radar, but the day in, day out execution of keeping promises to myself. Now that was the gold. That was really the win of the whole thing. The competition just was like a way to show all of the work that I had done. So it's really interesting how my perspective has changed.
Yeah, that is interesting. And, I don't know how far down this path you want to go. So I'll just throw this out and then, we can keep going or we can, redirect to something else. But Arthur Brooks, is a speaker and author, that you may be familiar with, some of your audience is. And he talks about, his big thing is happiness, right? The study, the pursuit of happiness. And he talks about this very thing that people get this idea built up in their mind that this moment of achievement, whatever it is, right? Your wedding day, you sell your business, your body fat percentage, you finish the Boston Marathon or whatever it is, that day is going to make you immensely happy. And it does, and it should, and that's all good. But somewhere in the back of our minds, what we are anticipating is that the happiness of those milestone moments is going to somehow continue to carry on. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how, like scientifically, neurologically, that's not even possible. Like we're made to have these ups and downs, and that we shouldn't as much be chasing the happiness of the moment as exactly what you're saying, like this journey, this process. Like, he talks about the idea that the anticipation of the vacation, the months that you spend planning it and researching it and doing all of that there is as much, or for some people, potentially even more joy in that than just the moment of sunset on the beach that day. Right. And so I think there's something to that is a mentality shift that I think we would do well to make more often. Not that we don't enjoy those big moments. Obviously we do, but don't expect them to last longer than the moment, and find joy in the process and the journey all along the way.
Yeah. And I think people know that, but I don't know. I just don't feel like it's really our nature, and especially in the culture that we live in, to look at it that way. And at least for me, the more joy I can find in the small moments of the day, or it doesn't even have to be joy. It can just be like, I said I was going to do this thing today and I did it. Even those simple things. Right. Yeah. So before we move on to the last subject of the day, I want to plug your website and your podcast. Tell people about your podcast. It's the Matt Ware Show on YouTube. Is that right?
Yes, the Matt Ware Show. And the website is themattware.com. All my social channels are the Matt Ware. So that's an easy place to find me. So we do a weekly podcast that is really geared toward leaders. So I speak to leadership concepts and principles and things like that. Teach from my 30 plus years of leadership experience. And of course, I'm in the trenches day in and day out with clients that I serve as an executive leadership coach. So YouTube and Apple and Spotify. It's on all the platforms. So
be sure to check that out, guys. Because I don't know, Matt, you're just such a natural speaker. I know you've had lots of years of practice, but your heart shows through, and I could learn a thing or two from you about communication. So I'll be picking your brain later on that.
Okay, you got it.
So the last subject I wanted to get into, and actually I found a common thread through all the things, which I'll wrap up the show with, but this sort of ties into the motivation and all the things we've been talking about. And you say that a lot of people are held up by their past. And what I'd like to know is, how do we know when we're actually learning from our past or being controlled by it? Because that's a tough one.
It is tough. I have come to believe that our past is influencing our present and our future more than we are giving it credit for. And I certainly am not, a mental health professional or therapist. So I'm not meaning to go that direction with it. Mm-hmm. Although I think we can all acknowledge, hey, there's stuff, right, that we've been through or experienced or whatever that probably does influence us. But I think just at a very just sort of normal day-to-day level, I think there's a handful of things that I see consistently pop up in the leaders that I work with, where their past really is controlling their present and their future more than they realize. A few of the things are past failures, right? And that's pretty obvious, right? People can get hung up on their failures and kind of where they know they've screwed up and haven't quite reconciled it, like you said, maybe to give themselves grace and to be able to move past that. On the other side of that, though, I actually see a lot of people that are also really hung up by past success. Success can be just as detrimental as failure, depending on how you process it. And I do see some people who have an unhealthy nostalgia, the good old days of what life used to be. That's the 45-year-old guy who's still talking about his high school football accolades. It's like, dude, like move on, right? Like we don't care that you won state 30 years ago. No, nobody cares anymore. Like, what are you doing with your life today? Mm-hmm. Past hurts, right? And I would define hurts again. I'm talking more in the leadership context, but what happens, and I think this is with all of us, is people hurt us personally or professionally. And so we get a little more callous. We get a little bit more cold. We keep people pushed away. Another one that I see a lot where people get hung up in the past is their habits. Even a good habit is not necessarily the right habit. If it used to serve you well, but it no longer serves you well. There are people who have just done the same morning routine for 10 years, but they really shouldn't be doing the same morning routine. They should be doing something different now. Mm-hmm. And so those are some of the ways I think, in my mind, if you have a lot of mental bandwidth that gets taken up by successes or failures in the past, if you're ruminating on things good or bad that happened more than a year ago, that may be an indicator that that's something to take a look at. Mm-hmm. If you haven't changed up your basic habits when it comes to whatever, reading and personal growth and fitness and eating, if you're doing the same thing for a long period of time, I guarantee you those habits are less effective at some point. And so you might want to change that up. So those are some of the things that I think are kind of telltale signs of how the past might be a bigger voice than you really want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some people aren't aware of that. And seeking wise counsel is a very good thing to do, I think, from my opinion, is who are the few people around me that are very close to me that can look at this from an objective point of view, that might be able to see something that I'm doing, saying, or how I'm behaving that I don't see. Because if you're in the habit of ruminating over past failures, you keep telling yourself the same story in your head over and over again, and you're operating on those beliefs, then that's a really hard rut to get out of sometimes.
It is. And sometimes, like you said, you don't know until you bring that up, to someone else. And that's why, we're always talking about being surrounded by people who are going to raise the level in your life, like whatever it is that you're doing personally, professionally, could be, church relationships, community, business, whatever it is, people that are going to help you raise the level, I think can help expose that. And to your point about, you don't always see it, right? I mean, we all have blind spots. And, I heard somebody say this the other day that is an interesting take on it, that there's actually no such thing as self-awareness, because you can't be self-aware without other people's input. Right. So even that is a little bit of a misnomer. So yeah, I think we do need people who are close enough to us to see when we're kind of living in the past and can call that out.
Why do you think it is that people tend to get stuck? It makes sense why they would get stuck on past failures or past negative experiences, but why do you think they get stuck on the past accolades or the nostalgia around back in the day? I'm interested to learn about that more.
I think that there's probably something to the idea of they want to keep the status that accolade afforded them in the moment. And, back to our happiness conversation just a minute ago, in the same way that happiness fades very quickly after a milestone, the status of a milestone fades pretty fast too, right? When a few months ago, right, when Elon Musk becomes the richest person in the world because he's now a trillionaire, well, within like a week, he was no longer a trillionaire, right? Because the stock prices had dropped.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how fleeting even these massive accomplishments are. I mean, there's been a lot of studies done around Olympic athletes, right? Like they can fall into very deep depression after winning Olympic gold because it's like, well, once you've achieved this, like what else is there?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a tendency to try to make that accolade last as long as it can. And on the other side of that, I think in some contexts, there can be a fear that I'll never be able to achieve that level of success again. Like that was it. That was the highlight of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to be fair, it's like, you probably only will be an Olympic gold medalist once, unless you're Michael Phelps, right? Like for most people, they're never going to get a shot to do that more than once. So that's kind of understandable. But I think when we're talking about everyday life kind of people, man, we got to realize that we got a lot of road in front of us. And I think we're not doing ourselves any favors if we always think whatever we've achieved is the best we're ever going to do.
Right.
But I think that fear can really make people want to just hold on to it longer than they probably should.
Yeah, because it feels good. I think it feels good to talk about, feels good to relive, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Yeah. It makes sense why people would hold on to it.
Absolutely.
But if you're doing good work in your life presently and you know that to be true, then I don't, that's where I get a little bit hung up. I'm like, my first instinct was like, well, they're not doing anything in their life right now. And I'm like, well, that's really cold to say. but maybe that's true. Maybe that is the fear that you're talking about that's leaving them very stuck in the moment and not able to move on.
Yeah. And I think that could be true. Maybe they aren't doing anything, but because they're afraid to do anything next, because what they do next might not be as good. It might not, bring as much money or, whatever. And so I think, we put a lot of unfair pressure on ourselves, probably. That's back to the grace piece that you talked about. But I'll bring a spiritual component into this too. The Apostle Paul said that we have to forget what lies behind and strain toward what lies ahead. And I think we can contextualize that and assume he's only talking about forgetting the bad things. But I think the overall context of what he's talking about, especially someone with his background and pedigree, we're not just forgetting the bad things, we're forgetting the good things too. Like we're actually leaving all of the past behind to continue to move forward in whatever God has for our lives. And I think we do have to let go of good and bad if we're going to have space for what's coming in the future.
Yeah. I had a group call recently with my paid subscribers, and it was such a great conversation. And we were talking about the story or the analogy of the rocks in the jar. I'm sure you've heard this, where like you have to make sure you put the rocks in first and then the pebbles and then the sand. Otherwise, there's no room, right? For the big rocks that are most important. It's so important to remember what's important. And if we're dwelling on the past and thinking about our past accomplishments and giving that so much weight, Matt, then that begs to question what we value.
Yeah. Well, and I think in some ways it's actually sad, right? Because if people's entire identity today is based on an accomplishment from 10 years ago, no matter how great it was, I think what they're essentially saying is life stopped then, right? Life stopped when I sold that business.
Living then. That's not life didn't stop, but they stopped.
Right. That's what I mean. Like their life stopped. They want to be frozen in time. And to me, that's, I don't know, that's sad, right? Like I wouldn't want that for anybody. I would want everybody to understand that regardless of what they've accomplished or where they've failed, there's a lot of life ahead of you. Like if you're still on the planet, if you're still breathing, there's still a reason, there's still a purpose. And man, don't give up on that and don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap this up with one last question. And if you have any parting thoughts for the audience, please feel free.
Of course.
The common thread that I'm seeing through all of this is the question of, to try to sum this up as best I can, how do we become someone who can trust God deeply, who can acknowledge what's happened to you honestly, and still say that I am responsible for what I do next? Would you say that sums up?
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. That's impressive that you're able to make those kind of summary comments in real time as we're going through that. I love that. I guess to tack onto that, and maybe this could be the final thought, is, I think sometimes we can, and this will carry on through what we're just talking about the past, future, and all these things, right? Like, golf is such an amazing game because it really puts this into focus. This idea that the only thing you have is the shot right now.
Yeah.
You cannot change the shot that you just made, and it's absolutely impossible for you to predict what the next shot beyond this is going to be, because you don't know where the ball is going to lie at that time. It's not like football where you're drawing up a series of plays or things like that. Like, you only have the shot as it lies right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, maybe as a final thought that I would just give to the audience, to say, like, man, just play the shot that you have right now. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about the last one, and don't think too far ahead about the next one. Play the shot that you've got now. Be willing to take action, right? And to loop back to something we said at the very beginning, like, you can pray all you want, but God's not swinging the club for you. Like you've got to take the shot. And then just continue to walk that through, and trust that as you're taking action, as you're moving forward, it's going to be imperfect and it's going to be messy and all of that, but you're going to get where you're supposed to go. Mm-hmm. I believe that. Yeah.
Me too. Well said, Matt. Very good way to end the conversation tonight. Thank you for coming back on again. It was a pleasure. I really enjoy our conversations.
Thank you for having me again. And yeah, I enjoy our conversations too. And hopefully the audience does as well. Or if not, they can, we'll just talk, and, if they want to hear it, they can.
Yeah. And if you have questions for Matt, put them in the comments. Go to themattware.com. He's on YouTube at The Matt Ware Show. He's also on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Yes. All right. Until next time, Matt.